We are going on a little bit of an adventure back in time to high school Megan. High school Megan. When I think about high school Megan, I think about theater because that was my lifeblood. I was basically in the theater from like 3:30 till 7 p.m. Probably not, but I was just in the theater all the time after school. Did so much theater. I also think of Bob Dylan because I was deeply obsessed with Bob Dylan. I would walk down the hallways with earbuds in to math class listening to Subterranean Homesick Blues just over and over again. I think really the main thing you need to know about High School Megan is that I once fell deeply in love with a boy because he told me that his favorite poetry was from the Beats. And the fact that a high school boy knew who the Beats were and liked them was just all High School Megan cared about. So, today I am obviously so excited because I am rereading my favorite high school book. Oh gosh, someone is rubbing up against the camera. I am both excited but a little bit nervous, and that is because I really don't want to hate this book. I'm just going to talk about it, okay? We're just going to talk about it. I have decided to reread my favorite book from high school, which is A Heartbreaking Work of Staggering Genius by Dave Eggers. I cannot tell you the influence that Dave Eggers has had on my life. When I read this book, I honestly I've been trying to remember how old I was when I read this book. I think I might have been 15, maybe 16. I'm not entirely sure, but there are so many books in my life that have ignited that feeling of awe and wonder and passion. And this certainly wasn't the first book to do this for me, but this just sent me on a rabbit hole of obsession with Dave Eggers and his writing. And I have read nearly every single book he has written since, and I loved it. I loved it so much. And I'm a little bit nervous. I'm a little bit nervous to return to it. And the reason why is A, like I said, I really don't want to hate it. And B, I'm worried that adult Megan has a vastly different taste in literature than young Megan, which I know isn't true, but it is just a little bit scary to return to an old love and see how it has changed and how you have changed. But I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. I have been thinking about this the entire time I was reading Jane Austen. I was dreaming of Eggers, and I was very excited to take this journey. And honestly, I didn't anticipate filming it, but I think it's going to be a really fun video because who knows, maybe I'll end up hating it, maybe I'll end up liking it. No idea. For obvious reasons, I don't want to look back on this and realize that it is pretentious drivel. The other thing is that it's now kind of cool to hate on this book. The one thing I really dislike is when someone criticizes any art form by calling it self-indulgent. I truly, actually, it's not even that I don't like it. I don't understand when people say art is self-indulgent, because I feel like art is the epitome of self-indulgence. It's self-expression, and how could it not be indulgent of self when you are creating it? I don't think that the best art has to be a reflection of you, but I do think that some of the best art is. And this is a ride. It is a journey. It is a definitive form of this type of book, and there's nothing quite like it. And it either is something that you love or something that you roll your eyes at and hate. Is it self-indulgent? I'm sure it is, but what art isn't? Okay, so if you don't know anything about A Heartbreaking Work of Staggering Genius, it is essentially a memoir. It is Dave Eggers' form of a memoir that follows his adoption/stewardship of his younger brother following the death of his parents. And it is a ride. It is the type of story that you laugh and you cry and you're amazed at the writing, and it defies genre and it defies form in a way that is brilliant. At least this is all what I'm remembering. I will say that when I first started dating Tom, I made him read this book, and even talking about this video, he was like, yeah, I remember it being good. So I don't think that everyone's gonna love this book as much as I do. So this is certainly not necessarily a recommendation. watch this video and see if it's something that you are interested in. I'm going to try really hard to keep it spoiler free. I mean, obviously we know he's going to adopt his brother and his two parents are going to die from cancer. Pretty much other than that, I don't remember what else happens in this book. I read it so very long ago. I've decided that to honor high school Megan, I'm going to read exactly like I did in high school, which is I'm going to make myself a coffee and I'm going to lay in my bed and drink it and read, much like I did in high school, because I didn't have a big fancy apartment. I had a bedroom. The only difference is I'm going to have a decaf, which I know high school Megan would mock. She would mock so hard. I used to drink like 5 cups of coffee a day. I started drinking coffee when I was like 15. It was insanity. And it destroyed me. It destroyed my stomach. So I still drink coffee. I do not drink as much coffee as I did. And that's how I'm gonna enjoy it. And you know what, old Megan? You're gonna have to deal with it. I don't know why I'm talking to past Megan like she's in the room. I sound insane, but it's just because I'm so excited. I'm so excited to read this, talking about it. I'm just gonna get to it. I'm just gonna start this journey and we will see what happens.
My life is like a theater where she makes her appearance every day, and every day it's the same old play. She's the main character, the heartbreaker, the savior, and the one that got away. So far away, it's so close to me. And it is getting harder to mask these feelings that I harbor for her, 'cause she's just out of reach, even when she's right in front of me. And on the days when she's miles away, I can still see her face. I guess I'm a ghost and she is a dream, the most beautiful thing I've seen. And she's just out of reach. She's just out of reach. She's not too accepting, but I hope to be her one exception someday. But someday seems so far away. Yeah, I'm just in atmosphere, heartbroken. You never know, 'cause you never know I'm here as she basks in our thunderous cheers. And it is getting harder to mask these feelings that I harbor for her, 'cause she's just out of reach, even when she's right in front of me. And on the days when she's miles away, I can still see her face. I guess I'm a ghost and she is a dream, the most beautiful thing I've seen. And she's just out of reach. She's just out of reach. Oh, my heart's in a cast, but it's a terrible actor, 'cause my emotions are kept in the background every time I get close and our eyes connect. I know how it goes, but I love to forget that she's just out of reach, even when she's right in front of me. And on the days when she's miles away, I can still see her face. I guess I'm a ghost and she is a dream, the most beautiful thing I've seen. And she's just out of reach. She's just out of reach.
All right. I have my favorite tea. Actually, honestly, the Serenity tea from Puka is like such a good tea. Way too hot to drink. I don't even know why I'm trying. Okay. I thought I would update. Okay. The great news is I'm still loving it. It is just as searing as I remembered it. I think it's really interesting to read this now because it's it's historic now. Like it's weird the references that he has. And let's just say if you are into the 90s and you want to learn more about what it was like to live in the 90s, and by 90s I mean 90s and early 2000s, this book is such an interesting time capsule for that. All I can think about when I read this book is that it feels like watching Garden State. I don't know if you've ever seen that Zach Braff movie, but Garden State was, surprise, one of my favorite movies in high school. It actually still is probably one of my favorite movies to this day. I love that movie. And this book very much feels like that, where it is like a time capsule of the 90s and early 2000s life and the like subculture that was there. The kind of alternative, edgy way of being, the anti-suburban, the anti-career driven, the artistic. That is very much what this book feels like. And I can totally understand why young Megan loved that, because like, oh my gosh, that's all I cared about back in the day. So what has happened? So this is not a spoiler, and I'm going to very much avoid spoilers because, to be honest, you can't really spoil this book. The book is about both of his parents dying from cancer within a few weeks of one another, and him at a very young age of 23 taking on the responsibility of raising his younger brother, who at the time was, I believe, 8. Feels angry. And he is very angry, and you can tell he's angry, but he's not acknowledging his anger. I think this book isn't for everybody because of that anger that is here, and I think that that's often why it is considered pretentious. I see it as someone who is trying to work through... You can't see what's happening right now, but my cat opened the door. I closed the door, and now he wants back outside the other door. But I can't keep the door open because the air conditioner is on. But yes, Dave Eggers is angry, and he is working through that anger in an artistic way that is writing down his life. So the things that I'm loving about this book is obviously his writing. His writing is crisp, it's clean, it's angry, it's heartfelt, and he reminds me a lot of Hemingway in the short sentences and the ability to portray a feeling in like 4 words, and that's really hard to do. I mean, the horrific thing that has happened to him, he could have talked about that in any which way, but it's what his tone that I find to be the most fascinating, and frankly what makes this book so good to read. I don't know if that made any sense. Some of the parts that really stick out to me is right off the bat on page 4, when he's talking about the doctors opening his mom up and seeing, basically he compares the cancer that has riddled her body to suburban sprawl. And again, there is that like time capsule of this is what it was like to be alternative in the 90s and early 2000s. There are so many references to Segas and Nintendo and Real World. He auditions for the Real World at some point. He reminds me so much of a 90s Bo Burnham, where he is self-aware, he's brilliant. Oh, he's 21, I'm sorry. He's 21 when he takes on responsibility for his younger brother, who is 7. The ages have jumped around, but he's 21 and his brother is 7. They're in this horrible position where his mom is dying, his father has passed away, and they are now just waiting for his mother to die, because it's a matter of time, and by a matter of time, days. When I rest my head on the couch, I know it's coming like something in the mail, something sent away for. We know it's coming, but we're not sure when. Weeks, months. She is 51. I am 21. My sister is 23. My brothers are 24 and 7. We are ready. We are not ready. People know. And then a little bit later down, We are waiting for everything to finally stop working. The organs, the systems, one by one, throwing up their hands. The jig is up, says the endocrine. I did what I could, says the stomach, or what's left of it. We'll get 'em next time, adds the heart, with a friendly punch to the shoulder. He slips in and out of these kind of dreamlike sequences when he's writing in these moments, and hello, I am sitting on my bed still. I feel like this vlog is very much me just like sitting on my bed, but I am about to start reading my next series of pages in the heartbreaking work of Staggering Genius, and I thought I would do like the miniest of updates because I essentially got through, there's like a chunk in the middle of the book where he is auditioning for the real world, and essentially, again, I'm not gonna spoil anything, but like the plot, like the book doesn't really have a plot. So there's really nothing to spoil, truly. So don't worry too much about it if this is a book that you are interested in reading, based off of this video. Anyway, so the real world interview actually isn't an accurate representation of what actually happened. It is a break in form, and it completely changes from the rest of the book in terms of the form. It's basically just a series of italicized questions and then him rambling, and it gets in pretty deep. He goes into like his childhood. There's a lot of exploration on the themes of why he wrote this book and how he feels about writing this book, and it really takes a bit of a step back, and in so many ways he is defending himself, in so many ways he is exploring his emotions in the wake of his parents' death, and it's probably, in my opinion, one of the most vulnerable parts of the book. But then after that happens, there's about 100 pages of like really, really boring just details about him working at this magazine that he founded called Might. I, for some reason, thought that this followed the founding of McSweeney's, but it's actually Might, which I think was the magazine that he founded before McSweeney's. What I'm trying to say is like the middle part of this book is always a little bit difficult to read because it is a startling break in form that is incredibly vulnerable, but also quite rambly. And then it leads into a bunch of young people like messing around. And so I understand the critiques of Eggers, and especially this book. Like, I understand why people think that it is very egocentric and maybe not worthy of all of its accolades. However, there are moments in his writing that are just, they touch on something. And I think I made this comparison before, but he really does remind me of Hemingway, which is, I think Hemingway is a very divisive writer because you either love his writing or you hate his writing. And one of the most vulnerable parts is he is begging this fictional interviewer to have him on the real world, and he talks about him and his brother and how they're extraordinary and they deserve this. And he says, I was born of both stability and chaos. I have seen nothing and everything. I'm 24 but feel 10,000 years old. I'm emboldened by youth, unfettered and hopeful, though inextricably tied to both the past and the future by my beautiful brother, who is part of both. Can you not see that we are extraordinary, that we were meant for something else, something more? All of this did not happen to us for naught, I can assure you. There's no logic in that. There's logic only in assuming we suffered for a reason. And I still am really enjoying it. I think I was thinking about it today. I am at the like hard part. I'm at the part where like for the next 100 pages, it is just going to be quite difficult to read because it's just a lot of like I said, it's a lot of like boring details. I think at the beginning of the book, he says, in the rules for entertainment, in the rules for enjoying this book, he says, Many of you might want to skip much of the middle, namely pages 239 to 251, which concerns the lives of people in their early 20s, and those lives are very difficult to make interesting, even when they seem interesting to those living them at the time. So I feel like that's a perfect summary of like where I am right now in the book. Is not a whole lot of interesting things are happening. I don't know. We'll see. We will see. I don't know what I'm going to rate this book because it's so jarring reading it now as an adult. I don't think that I hate it. I don't know if I would have read that, if I would have read this now, if I would have loved it as much. I think that I needed to read this as a teenager. I'm actually a really big believer in the time in your life in which you read certain books impact your feelings for them. You know, this book I read in high school, and I feel like it spoke to my high school self that maybe in a way it's not speaking to my adult self. You know, when I read Tolstoy, when I read War and Peace last year, like I needed to read that book at that point in my life, and it was so profound and it changed my life, and I feel like this book changed my young adult life. So I still don't I don't think I'll ever like say that I don't like this book. Obviously I love this book, but I just think it's so interesting. Like, had I read this now, would I still like it? And I don't know. I think I love his writing, but do I love the content? Do I love his approach to the story? I am struggling with that. I hope it has been clear throughout this, is I kind of just like annotate to infuse my own thoughts. There are two ways that I annotate. One is to infuse my own thoughts into this book, and to have a record of like how I was feeling when I read certain moments. And then the other way that I annotate is to pull out like beautiful passages that like speak to my soul. Friends, I'm sitting here because I have even more thoughts that I need to just talk about, because it's just like I've just been sitting here thinking about this book. Obviously I'm reading it, but there's a moment just like speaking to the whole 90s culture and like time capsule aspect. They are currently rushing right now to a restaurant because they hear that Bill Clinton is eating at it, and Dave Eggers goes into like a big rant about how like Clinton is smart and young, and like, you know, we need a smart young president and all this stuff. Anyway, this is before anything happened with Clinton, but I am so happy that I'm reading this book, even if I'm like not necessarily loving it. It is so interesting to me to read it now as an adult, because there's that anger that I was talking about, and I wonder if Dave Eggers would write a different book now, because as I'm reading this now, older, I feel like young Megan recognized the anger within these pages and felt it and understood it inherently and didn't know how to name it, whereas older Megan can see it from a distance, from, you know, the distance of age and knowing yourself a little bit more and knowing the world around you a little bit more, still recognizing that you know nothing. But I can see that anger at a distance. And it's so interesting to me to do this because it's like reading an old diary from myself where I get to kind of look back at my youth and think about it. Okay, final thoughts. Time for some final thoughts. Overall, I'm really glad that I reread it. I think that it was so interesting to see how my tastes have evolved throughout my life. I think that Eggers' writing is fantastic. I really do. But it is no longer my taste. I don't love the short clipped sentences. I don't love the flat tone. Some of my biggest problems with this book were the kind of edgy tone of the jokes that just don't really land anymore. I think that the anger within the pages was quite startling to me to read. I don't remember this book feeling this angry, and I think that a lot of that has to do with kind of the angst that you feel as a teenager, or that some teenagers feel, and that need for edginess and subversion. I feel like young Megan really responded to those things and old Megan doesn't really need them anymore. Another thing that I really didn't like was the very obvious inability to confront the anger and the grief and all of the feelings that I know Eggers was going through. They translate into the page, but there's this subversive thing that happens with this book where you can tell that Eggers is angry and he is working through it on the page, but he's not working through it in a way that actually confronts anything. A lot of this book feels like a performance, and that's kind of what I was getting at when I was comparing it to Bo Burnham's style. I think that Bo Burnham is a lot more self-reflective than Dave Eggers is in this book particularly, which is why I probably still love Bo Burnham and love his work, and why I'm ready to kind of put Dave Eggers in the backseat a little bit of my life. I highly recommend revisiting a past favorite or a book that you feel like changed your life at some point in your life, because for me this was such an eye-opening experience to see how much I've grown in my tastes and in my humor and overall just in the way that I see life. I thought it was so, of all of the things that I thought in this journey, I didn't expect to come out of this feeling like I have grown immensely. So what do I rate this? What do I rate this book? I feel like I rate this book now around a 3 out of 5 stars, but I'm going to keep it as a 5 out of 5 for the history of it. Would I recommend this book? I don't think so. I think that the anger and the jokes and the edginess can be quite triggering to a lot of people, and I say that because it kind of was for me on the page. It was really hard to read an angry young man, I think, probably due to a lot of the things that are happening in the world right now. Whether that anger is justified or not, I don't want to comment on. I think for me it was just a very angry book, and I responded to that. Do I think that Dave Eggers is an exceptional writer? Absolutely. Is his style something that I gravitate towards now? No, I'm so surprised about that more than anything. It kind of makes me want to reread Hemingway now, because I want to know if I will love Hemingway as much as I used to. I don't often update my Goodreads in a way that would justify anyone following me. However, I did feel the need to write a little bit of a review for this book, because I did not change the 5-star rating or I take it off of my all-time favorites shelves. But one thing that I did do was I wrote a review, which I've never done. And it says, older Megan can't look past the rage in these pages, the misguided edginess of youth, the eye-rolling jokes, and refusal to explore issues that desperately need it. These aren't criticisms, but more observations. Young Megan recognized these themes in these pages, but was unable to name them. I'm so glad that older Megan can. This was a journey of my own evolution and growth as much as it was a fun thing to revisit. And I feel like that summarizes it perfectly. I'm so grateful that I reread this book. It will still be a book that I talk about whenever someone asks about my all-time faves. But it is not a book that I would necessarily push on other people to read. I think that this was a very personal book, and I'm so glad that you got a little bit of an insight into how I annotate, because how I annotate is very much also a reflection of my own reading journey, and the fact that books really do feel like moments in time for me, and how I treat them as an exchange of ideas, and that reflects a lot in my annotating. I don't know if any of that made sense. It's really early, right before work, but you saw a little bit of how I annotate. I treat it very much as a diary, as a conversation between me and the book. I don't know if that sounds wooey, but I don't know if it's obvious with this channel. Books are incredibly important to me, and of course, books are many things. They are a way to expand your knowledge. They are escapism. There's so many things, but for me, this book really proved to me that they can also be memories, and they can also be moments in time. And this book will forever be that for me. I am so ready to move on from it and stop thinking about it and look back on it with that smile that you have when you look back on fond memories in your life. And me in particular, it's a way for me to kind of laugh about past Megan and teenage Megan. I love her so dearly. She is everything that I needed to become who I am today, but she's in the past for a reason. And so I am going to conclude this reading vlog, this random reading vlog. I thank you so much if you've made it this far. I hope it was at the very least entertaining for you. But thank you so much for being here, and stay tuned, because I'm sure we have a ton more exciting adventures with books on the horizon. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time.